I see that folks are starting to join. We will begin at 7:05. Until then, we hope you enjoy the slideshow of past Metro Justice annual dinners. As more folks begin to join us, just want to let you all know that we will begin the program at 7:05. Until then, we hope you enjoyed the slideshow of past Metro Justice annual dinners. good evening and welcome everyone to Metro Justice's very first virtual annual dinner celebration. I'm Mohini Sharma, the lead organizer at Metro Justice. I'd like to start by recognizing and thanking our sponsors for this year. To start with thanking our major sponsors, we'd like to thank the Rochester Labor Council, longtime Metro Justice members Bruce Popper and Barbara Sullivan, the Amalgamated Transit Union, the Federation of Social Workers, longtime Metro Justice members Molly and Ken Traub, who have been contributing members of Metro Justice for a combined 104 years. We'd also like to thank our activist sponsors, including members Joe Cummings, Liz Alpert, and Jim Bearden, as well as Lou Montemaggi and Workers United. We'd also like to thank our ally sponsors, the Citywide Tenant Union of Rochester, the Rochester Organization of Rank and File Educators, as well as Jen Lunsford, who's running for State Assembly. Included in our ally sponsors are Rochester Democratic Socialists of America and the First Unitarian Church, as well as members Gail Mott, Marcus Dunn, Annette Dragon, whose photos you enjoyed at the beginning, Julie Miller, Denise Young, and Bridget Watts. Other ally sponsors include the Communication Workers of America, Local 1170, United Auto Workers, Local 1097, 1199 Service Employees International United, as well as Assemblymember Harry Bronson. This past year has been filled with more turmoil than any of us anticipated. With the outbreak of COVID-19, we saw all the combined horrors of capitalism and white supremacy unfold within months. We lost loved ones, became isolated from one another, and suffered job losses and threats to our basic human needs. Health insurance companies and corporate CEOs like Jeff Bezos of Amazon saw their wealth soar as millions of people lost their health care, are facing an eviction and utility shutoff crisis, and aren't sure where the next meal for their families is going to come from. Corporations got massive bailouts, while our people were denied comprehensive relief and were forced back to work prematurely to risk death in the name of profit for bosses. We have also suffered the escalation of another epidemic, widespread, lethal police violence against our Black communities, and brutal government-sanctioned suppression when we fight back for justice. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake, and so many other Black folks that have been brutalized or killed by police deserve justice. Their families deserve justice, their communities deserve justice, and that justice looks like defunding the police and bringing down capitalism and white supremacy once and for all. Which brings me to the rays of hope we also experienced in the past months. While this past year has been one of immense turmoil, it has also been one of immense resiliency. While we have witnessed all the horrors of our current systems more starkly than ever, we have also shown that we're capable of creating a different world when we come together, look out for each other, and fight alongside each other until we're all free. Grassroots mutual aid networks have proliferated across the country, including Rochester's own Rochester Mutual Aid Network, which just reached a milestone of fulfilling 700 requests for aid. The Black Lives Matter movement, anchored by grassroots organizations led by Black leaders, continues to rise up, from Portland to Minneapolis to Kenosha to Rochester. BLM remains strong in its fight to defund and abolish the police, and is joined by solidarity protests in over 60 countries across every continent in the United States. Tenant unions are growing in number and engaging in rent strikes, demanding that housing be a human right, just like our very own Rochester Citywide Tenant Union. The nationwide movement for universal healthcare is also growing, led by grassroots organizations, like by Metro Justice members in the Campaign for New York Health and our Elder Justice Committee, to make sure we come out of this pandemic with a commitment to comprehensive healthcare for all. We've also seen a newer movement gain national prominence, the movement for public power, for public democratic ownership of our utilities. Our world is on fire, and private investor-owned utilities have got to go. At Metro Justice, we have been doing everything we can to play our part in turning crisis and fear and grief into power. Power in which we rise up, fight back, and build the just world that we all deserve. There's no one better to share more about the part we've played than our own members. We'll start with our Elder Justice Committee, who put together this video to share their advocacy over the last year with you.
Tonight about how the most serious cases of coronavirus are impacting our most vulnerable population.
The state health department has begun releasing the numbers of people who have died from COVID-19 while living in nursing facilities. News 10
deaths at any adult care facility. Elder Justice Committee co-chair Ken Traub says the public and most importantly family members have a right to know what's going on at these facilities. He would like to see the state take these numbers one step further.
We would like to know, is there a nursing home that has 8 of those 14 deaths, or are they distributed 1 per 14 of the 34 nursing homes in Monroe County?
As of Sunday, health officials have reported almost 1,800 deaths at nursing homes across the state.
There's a group calling on New York State to better regulate nursing homes. The Elder Justice Committee of Metro Justice wants the Safe Staffing for Quality Care Act approved by the state legislature. It sets staffing guidelines and also manages unannounced nursing home inspections by the state health department. The plan would revoke the nursing home immunity law, which Metro Justice claims has gone too far.
That law is, in effect, it's going way beyond the intended scope. And what it's doing is providing a shield for the very worst of the owners of care facilities who, for a long, long time, have placed the financial bottom line over and above quality patient care.
But that's okay.
There we go. White pick. Thank you.
I'm with the Elder Justice Committee of Metro Justice, which is a Rochester-based volunteer advocacy organization. I also want to say that my mother, who passed away in February, lived for over 13 years in a nursing home. So that's how I came to advocacy. Governor Cuomo compared COVID-19 in a nursing home to fire in dry grass. While the residents have many health problems and require intimate care, we assert that the dry grass is actually the systemic, long-time neglect and inaction by New York State and federal governments to nursing home problems which have been documented for decades. Please consider 2 major contributors to over 6,400 COVID nursing home deaths: inadequate direct care staffing levels and lax Department of Health enforcement of nursing home regulations, which
coming through. But Mary Dell, I wanted to give you the opportunity. You and I have met a couple of times. We talked on the phone. You were going to begin your list of recommendations of what can be done to deal with the systemic failure and the failure of oversight and the staffing issues. I'm going to yield my minute 20 seconds to you if you want to finish and let us know what your recommendations would be to take corrective action.
Okay, well, I almost got it through. Well, we want the Department of Health to assert its regulatory powers over the nursing homes by doing unannounced in-person inspections, have true and meaningful findings of harm, as was discussed earlier, meaningful fines, and revoking licenses for chronically poor performing homes.
In addition to our Elder Justice Committee, there is also our Health Justice Committee, which is the Rochester chapter of the Campaign for New York Health. Metro Justice is actually a founding member of the statewide campaign to make sure that all New Yorkers have comprehensive health care. Our member volunteers with Rochester for New York Health worked tirelessly to educate and bring together Rochester residents on the New York Health Act, which, if passed, would guarantee comprehensive health care for all without premiums, deductibles, or copays. We built an alliance with the Rochester Citywide Tenants Union to fight for safe, affordable housing for all because true healthcare also requires stable housing. Universal healthcare and rent forgiveness must both be a part of COVID relief here in New York. We organized rallies and community events like our annual Halloween healthcare horror story share and pumpkin carving, through which we found both joy and friendships as we fought together. We testified at the Rochester Regional New York State Senate and Assembly hearing for the New York Health Act. We were joined by allies in the immigrant labor community like Alianza Agricola and other allies in labor like United Auto Workers Local 1097. We are growing and we will keep fighting until we win. Lastly, we also launched our newest campaign, Rochester for Energy Democracy. Rochester for Energy Democracy began almost exactly a year ago now. And since then, we have grown immensely in our fight against not only the climate crisis, but also to make sure that heat and electricity are human rights. Our elected Red Steering Committee member, Emily Ghosh, will share more about that.
The Rochester for Energy Democracy Committee was formed in the summer of 2019 to address the need for an energy system in Rochester that is affordable, reliable, and clean. We believe this is possible if we create a community-owned and operated energy economy, replacing RG&E with a public, not-for-profit, democratically governed utility, and organizing our neighborhoods for community-owned renewables. The RED Committee has done a lot in the last year to work towards these goals, and some of the highlights are presented in this video. Back in August 2019, Metro Justice members connected with the statewide public power initiative called the Energy Democracy Alliance to generate ideas for RED. Then, Metro Justice launched RED at the Introducing RED event on September 20th, 2019. The first of many events during the Global Climate Week. This event had more than 35 attendees and included a short presentation, meet and greet activities, and refreshments. A week later, Metro Justice alongside several local organizations organized a Rochester climate strike in solidarity with climate strikes happening around the world. This strike was attended by hundreds of local residents who took to the streets to demand climate action from government and industry. Earlier this year, RED finalized a vision and mission for the initiative. We created a public sign-on letter of our 4 principles, which was signed by members of the coalition. We're also working on a community power initiative. Community solar farms generate revenue and create jobs for a community. The revenue can be used as credits towards household electricity bills or other community needs. The RED team is currently evaluating the feasibility of a community solar farm in the Plymouth Exchange neighborhood and is developing a framework for similar projects in other LMI communities. So far, the Plex Community Solar Farm has had significant progress. We have selected a site and have a preliminary site lease agreement. We've done initial engineering analysis to assess the suitability of the site. We have a preliminary cost analysis and are currently finding funding opportunities and grants. We've selected a minority-owned engineering consultancy for the project, as well as a nonprofit financial partner. There are also several energy-related concerns with the COVID-19 pandemic, which the RED team has been working to address. In May, the Public Power New York Coalition, which Metro Justice is a member of, publicly launched a statewide utility ratepayer strike to demand comprehensive utility bill relief due to COVID-19. Only a few weeks after, in June, we won our first victory when Governor Cuomo signed the COVID-19 utility shutoff moratorium bill into law. But there's still a lot of work to do to address debt forgiveness and further protections during the recovery period from COVID-19. Over 100 people pledged to strike across the state, including several from Rochester. Many residents created testimonials of their experiences and concerns with RG&E, including the sending of shutoff notices despite the moratorium. A digital base building campaign was initiated this April to ensure continued public outreach on the Public Utility Initiative during the COVID-19 pandemic. We even have our own podcast called the Rochester Public Power Hour, which is available online. We've been developing the Red Leadership Team, and this June we welcomed our newly elected steering committee. We've also been growing our membership base, and we have new members joining in our bi-weekly meetings every month. So thank you all for your continued support, and we look forward to sharing more highlights with you next year.
If there's one thing we've learned this year, it is that another world is possible, and we have the capability to build it for ourselves. Here to inspire and guide us towards that vision is our keynote speaker today, Steve Williams from Left Roots. Steve has decades of experience in transformative leftist organizing and has learned from working class movements for liberation across the world. He began as an organizer with the Philadelphia Union of the Homeless and the San Francisco Coalition on Homelessness in the early 1990s. Trips to South Africa and Cuba during that period forged Steve's commitment to connecting day-to-day struggles for justice to a larger vision of revolutionary systemic change. From 1997 to 2012, Steve served as the executive director of POWER, People Organized to Win Employment Rights, which is a community-based organization of low-income and working-class tenants, transit riders, and workers, an organization he also co-founded. Now he works with Left Roots, a national organization dedicated to increasing social movement leftists' individual and collective capacity to formulate, evaluate, and carry out a strategy to build 21st century socialism. In addition to his professional organizing experiences, Steve has been an active volunteer in various local, national, and international social movements as well. We're sure you'll have questions for Steve as you listen to his insights. If we have time, we'll ask Steve to address a few. To submit a question, please use the Q&A function. It looks like a little chat bubble at the bottom of your screen, and we will pick a few for Steve to address if there is time. And now I'm super excited to introduce Steve Williams.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mohini. And first of all, thank you and congratulations to all of the members of Metro Justice. Like, it was incredible getting a chance to see the digest, the summary of all of the work that you've been up to for the last year. Yeah, I really appreciate the invitation to sort of be here with you tonight. I was especially excited about actually getting a chance to be in person with you because it would have been the first time that I'd been to Rochester. But I am really grateful for this opportunity for us to be able to connect, even if it's online. And in particular, I want to thank Mohini and the members of the Membership and Fundraising Committee for all of your perseverance and diligence in continuing to put this event on as an online forum, even though we're not all able to be in the same place right now. And it seems especially important to me because events like this are obviously important to raise money for vital organizations like Metro Justice. But I think in particular right now, events like this offer an opportunity for us as people of conscience to come together and rekindle the spark that we all have to fight for a better world. And so whether it's in person or whether it's via a computer screen, I'm incredibly grateful to be in the presence of other people who are obviously engaged very seriously in the fight to turn back the conditions that we're facing right now. And I think it goes without saying that we are confronting some incredibly daunting times. The system of racial capitalism has produced a series of overlapping crises, whether it's the economic crisis, the ecological crisis, and the crisis of empire, that is producing symptoms, manifestations, problems that we're experiencing in our day-to-day lives that are unprecedented and unnecessary. I think it's important, and Mohini pointed to this, that the negative conditions that we experience in our communities, in our workplaces, are not the experiences that everyone has. There is a narrow layer of society, the 1%, the capitalist class, that is, even in the midst of this pandemic, reaping in untold amounts of profit. Jeff Bezos recently became noted as the first trillionaire. Right? And so as we wrap our heads around the particular crisis that capitalism is laying on all of us, it's really critical for us to understand that these negative instances are not just falling on us, and that those negative consequences are unevenly distributed throughout society. So women, people of color, gender oppressed folks are experiencing this particular episode in human life very, very differently. And our seizing the opportunity to come together to build solidarity, to build alliance with one another, is critical in the face of these particular conditions. The pandemic is obviously something that all of us are having to confront, whether it's the fact that our social lives have been radically restructured, whether it's that we're being forced to choose whether to go back to work or whether to send our kids back to school. Countless of us have experienced loss, and I'd like to pass along my condolences to anybody who has lost a friend, family member, or loved one to COVID-19. The conditions that the pandemic has created are then playing out in a landscape where public hospitals have been gutted, where public schools have been defunded. Again, these are experiences, conditions that are not evenly felt throughout society. And then layered on top of that, again, as Mohini talked about, there have been too many police murders of unarmed Black people. And in response, the executive of the federal government has exploited the power of the White House not to offer condolences, not to offer permanent solutions to the dynamics of racialized state violence, but instead he's used his power to rally misogynist theocrats and white supremacist vigilantes who are openly expressing disdain for Black life. And then, as if all of that were not enough, today we found out about the passing of Chadwick Boseman, whose portrayal of Black Panther embodied the spirit of resistance, dignity, and forward-thinking possibilities that has inspired so many people to take the streets over the last few months. And so it's hard, these particular times that we're living in. And despite all of that, I will say to you all, I still feel a sense of hope. But because I haven't gotten a chance to visit Rochester, because I probably have not gotten a chance to meet many of you in person, it may be helpful if I share a little bit of a background beyond what Mohini shared about how I got here. I was born in Kalamazoo, Michigan in 1969. That's right, 1969. To parents who fled the Jim Crow South. They met in college in 1962 at Spelman and Morehouse in the midst of the upsurge of the civil rights movement. In fact, my mom showed me, once I got politically active, one of her yearbooks where there was a picture of her having lunch with Howard Zinn while he was teaching at Spelman College. And so while I was growing up, and when I expressed some dismay at the way the world was disorganized by the leadership of Ronald Reagan, my mom would often say, you know, Steve, I think you were born at the wrong time. I think you were supposed to be out on the streets at the time that your dad and I were in college. And I will say I held that. Like it cut a little too deeply. There were definitely moments where I thought I had missed the chance. I studied social movements. I longed for the opportunity of being out on the streets with other people fighting for a better world. And after college, I got a chance to spend the next 25 years organizing working class people. Homeless folks, welfare recipients, domestic workers in San Francisco, the city really that I now call home. And in the midst of all of that organizing, I was fortunate enough to be a part of a lot of victories. We were able to win labor protections for workfare workers. We were able to negotiate better working conditions for immigrant Latinas who were working to clean the houses of the wealthy elite in San Francisco. But I was also a part of a lot of campaigns that lost. And all of those losses really stung. But through it all, I've been fueled by the knowledge that we can do better. The recognition that the problems that we're experiencing now are social problems. They're not natural like the rain. They're not inevitable like the sun rising and setting. But these are social problems that have solutions if we're able to mobilize our power to bring that reality into being. And so whether it was trips to South Africa, or whether it was studying about the co-ops in the Mondragon region of Spain, or whether it's seeing mutual aid projects like the ones that are taking place in Rochester, or the ones that are taking place in Northern California now as our state is on fire. All of those have been demonstrations to me that when the best of us come together, we actually have the possibility of creating a world that not only recognizes our deep interconnection to one another and the vibrancy of our humanity, but we also have the possibility of meeting all of our basic day-to-day needs so that we have the opportunity to relate to one another in a very different way. And it's really been the mobilizations over the last few months, whether it was the brave actions of folks rising up in response to the killing of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd or Jacob Blake, like Mohini said, in every state of this country, and as well as around the globe. It's been incredible to see people rising up, but it's also been incredible to see a lot of that energy be harnessed into new groups, new organizations. And so I don't know if people are aware, but just yesterday, the Movement for Black Lives hosted a national Black convention online that brought together more than 25,000 activists who have been radicalized by this moment. And the possibility of those new activists and groups linking up with organizations like Metro Justice that have decades of organizing experience under your belt, I think gives me a glimmer of hope and gives me a sense of the possibility. And that's made particularly acute by the recognition that history has shown us that out of crisis comes the opportunity to make real what we might not have dreamed to be possible in an earlier period. And the crisis that we're facing right now because of racial capitalism, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, means that even after there's a vaccine, we're not going to go back to what existed before. And I think all of us connected can agree that what existed before was not good enough anyway. And so the challenge that sits in front of us is, how do we confront, how do we meet the challenge that sits in front of us so that not only can we go back to where we were, but in fact, so that we can realize an even greater potential. And so I want to offer 2 points that I would encourage us to consider as we think about how we're going to position ourselves now and how we're going to move forward in order to take advantage of this moment of crisis. The first is that we need to organize transformatively. So it has been incredibly inspiring to see the upsurge and the number of people who have mobilized and taken to the streets. I want to be absolutely clear that that is absolutely necessary for the kind of movement that we are trying to build. And mobilization alone is not enough. The members of the Elder Justice Committee, anybody who has as little hair as I do, and what hair I have is quickly turning gray, means that I have seen enough upsurges and ultimately dissipation of the energy and enthusiasm that comes in the aftermath of one egregious action by a corporation, by the government. The mobilizations are necessary, but alone they're not sufficient. We have to harness that energy into organization, where mobilizations provide a spark. It's organizations that sustain the fire, that transform the world ultimately, and converts utopian possibilities into awe-inspiring realities. So different than mobilizing, organizations are built to last. And if those organizations see themselves part of a project to transform the world, then they can engage in that long-lasting relationship building in a way that actually builds not only the organization and not only the movement, but it actually develops new capacities amongst the members and all of the people who are engaged in that organization. So, I mean, some of this can be abstract, and I will say that for me, my best teacher has always been the organizations that I've gotten a chance to be a part of, and in particular, the members and leaders who have run those organizations and who have taught me more about what it means to fight for justice than any other experience that I've had. And so I wanted to share the experience, the sort of brilliance of one of the leaders that I got a chance to work with, and her name was Emma Harris. And I think Colin's going to share a picture of Emma. And Emma, you can't tell by this picture, was relatively diminutive. She was about 5'2". And the first time I met Emma was at a bus yard in San Francisco, where she, along with thousands of other welfare recipients, were tasked with cleaning graffiti off of the public buses. And the conditions were horrendous out at the bus yards. The workers were doing work that was once performed by unionized city employees. And now Emma and the other bus cleaners at that bus yard were required to do that work in exchange for $365 a month with no benefits and no possibility of being hired into the permanent positions. Thanks, Colin, for sharing the picture of Emma. So when I first met Emma, she, all of the members at that work site were complaining about the conditions, and they were threatening about going on strike. And I was like, okay, well, if you all want to go on strike, then let's talk about this. And ultimately people said, no, we're not going to go on strike unless Emma says that it's okay. I was like, well, who's Emma? Like, let's get Emma's permission. And people were like, well, Emma's around the corner having lunch right now, so somebody will go get her. So somebody went to go get her, and I was expecting like this 6'9", like husky, loud-voiced person to come out. And eventually Emma rounded the corner. Emma took very delicate steps. And she eventually came and she said, well, I think we can do this, but I need to talk to all of the other workers in all of the other shifts. And what became clear was that Emma's power didn't come from sort of a boisterous voice or being willing to throw herself on the machinery of society, but it really came from the fact that she was an incredible listener. She heard people's problems. She was able to connect other people. And for that reason, folks trusted her, and people were willing to take action if Emma said that she thought it was the right thing to do. So we eventually organized a strike with Emma's permission, and we won that worksite's agreement to provide personal protective gear for all of the workers at that site. But that particular campaign was a success, but what's important about the story of Emma is that she stayed part of the organization. So even after that campaign, when we would go to City Hall to testify, as soon as the sheriffs came to tell us to shut up, to stop chanting, to allow the esteemed supervisors to carry on with their business of cutting the welfare checks of the poorest people in San Francisco, Emma was often really intimidated. Understandably, these were people with guns, with batons, and seemingly ready to use them. But Emma stayed part of the organization, continued to come to the political education that we would run, and eventually, and again, I'm dating myself here, but we had an opportunity to send members to Seattle to participate in a protest against the World Trade Organization. We didn't know what the battle in Seattle was going to be, but we had the opportunity to send 2 members. And so Emma went along with another member, and all of a sudden we started getting reports of tear gas and cops in riot gear. And this was before internet video, so we were glued to the radio trying to get reports of what was going on, trying to make sure that Emma and Jason were safe. And they were. When they came back, Emma was an entirely different person. Emma said, we are fighting for a better world. And what is clear is that there are more of us who want that world than there are cops. And so it's clear that they're going to tell us to shut up. But I've now been part of an experience where we decide what the future is going to be, where we decide what the terms of debate are going to be. And it was from that experience that Emma became a leader in the movement that ultimately led to raising the minimum wage in San Francisco, that ultimately led to the formation of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. It was that transformative experience that showed Emma what it is that she was capable of. And it not only won campaigns, it did that. It not only brought other people into the organization and into the movement, it did that, but it transformed Emma's understanding of herself in relationship to the rest of her community and the relationship to the rest of the world. That is the power of transformative organizing. It is the long-lasting relationship building and the commitment to developing new capacities amongst the members. This is an approach, it's a methodology that is not particularly popular or common in the United States. You all in Rochester are fortunate because Metro Justice happens to be an organization that is continuing to try to forge what this model looks like. But it's not just community organizations. There are trade unions. There are religious organizations that are starting to incorporate elements of transformative organizing, not only so that we can strengthen our respective organizations, but ultimately so that we can transform the world. So there's a particular aspect of our work that transformative organizing can really strengthen. It helps us move beyond individual instances of fighting campaigns to win policy or to elect new officials, because in all of those instances, they're temporary, they're ephemeral. What we're looking for is a permanent state of possibility where our humanity is recognized and we have the guaranteed ability to have all of our basic needs met. Transformative organizing opens up the possibility of developing that kind of movement. But the second point that I want us to consider is that transformative organizing alone isn't enough. That we need to couple transformative organizing with liberatory strategy. And liberatory strategy ultimately helps us guide and align our day-to-day work alongside that of other organizations in an effort to reach our North Star of winning liberation for all people and the planet. Now, it's important to say that strategy, much like organizing, is a concept that is dramatically misunderstood in the movement, particularly in the United States. So different than seeing strategy as a tactic or as something that can only be understood in retrospect, liberatory strategy is anchored in the vision of the mechanics of a society that makes liberation possible. In the same way that a system based on exploitation, like capitalism, will never make liberation possible for all people. On the contrary, we need to figure out the mechanisms of a society that actually makes liberation possible, not just in a snapshot, but on a self-reproducing basis. Liberatory strategy is based in that kind of vision and an accurate analysis of the real conditions in the world, so that we can then theorize what is the work that we can take on today that unlocks new possibilities tomorrow. How is it that we can drive our work forward, developing new capacities, unlocking new possibilities? Now, I mean, the conditions that we're facing are daunting. It's become cliche now to say that these conditions are unprecedented. And there's a reason for that. There is an unprecedented nature to where we are. But the clarity that the times that preceded these are not sufficient shapes how we see this moment that we're facing. And I deeply believe that if we skill up as transformative organizers and as liberatory strategists, if we support transformative organizers and liberatory strategists, I'm really hopeful that we're going to be able to meet the challenge that these difficult times are presenting us with. There's no way that that is going to come easily. In some very important ways, the opposition has undermined and attacked the institutions that would have supported and held us accountable to developing these skills. But there are anchors, there are beacons that we can look to ultimately develop those skills and then connect with other organizations. And I'll say again, I just think that you all are incredibly fortunate to have an organization like Metro Justice that has committed itself not only to the project of building up its particular campaigns, but is also committed to connecting with the work that is happening across the country and around the globe. And I guess just as a final bonus point that I think we should be considering, I'm just really thankful to be able to be here with you all tonight. I'm thankful to Metro Justice for the work that you all do, but I am most appreciative of the way in which you all have brought us together. Obviously, this is not the way that we would want to be connected, but times like this, the inertia of capitalism pushes us to isolate ourselves. And it's easy to do when we're all locked in our own apartments or houses, when we're out in the streets, when we are with masks on. But it's important to have events like this to remind us that we're not alone. The challenges that we face are daunting, are immense, but there are incredible people. And there's an incredible number of people who are coming together, whether it's in person or over Zoom, to remind us that we're not alone. And so I really want to thank Metro Justice for pulling this event together. I want to thank all of you for joining in. And maybe to close out, I wanted to do the Asada Shakur call and response. Typically, I don't know whether you all do that, but typically when I've done it before, there is often two rounds of it. The first done in a quiet voice, and then the second done in a loud roar. I'm sure that a number of you are eating dinner. Some of you may have sleeping children. Others of you may have sleeping partners that have fallen asleep in the midst of this talk. So we're not going to do the loud roar, but I would ask, and trust me, I understand that it may feel awkward, uncomfortable to talk to your computer screen. I've been doing this for about 30 minutes now. So in an act of solidarity, I would ask that you all follow along with me. Again, it is a call and response from a nugget of wisdom that Asada Shakur has gifted our movements, and I think is something that is very helpful for us to be reminded of. So if you can repeat after me. It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
Thank you, Ethel. It is our duty to win.
It is our duty
to win.
We must love each other and protect each other.
We must
love each other and protect each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve. That was every bit as inspiring as I knew it would be. We are definitely going to get you to Rochester as soon as the opportunity presents itself.
Well done. Well done.
We are so not done with tapping into all the wisdom and the experience that you have to offer. Because we do have time, I do actually want to field some audience questions. You touched on this a little bit already, but one question I have is, why do you feel it is important to directly and explicitly connect struggles for justice to leftist ideological grounds?
There's a couple, it's a great question. There's a couple things that I want to say about that. One, I think it's important, it has been important for me to see myself and my work in a long arc of history. I know that when I first began organizing, I had this kernel of insight that I really took from my mentors at the Philadelphia Union of the Homeless, that it was possible not only to wage campaigns, but also to develop the leadership and political analysis of the members who are in the organization, who are oftentimes both referred to and think of themselves as being insufficient to be able to develop analysis or strategy. So I started reading everything I could read about organizing, and nothing seemed to echo that particular insight. And in fact, everything pushed in the opposite direction, and said that leadership development and political education was in fact a waste of time, that the only priority was to wage campaigns, and the measure of success of an organization was whether it won its campaign or not. It didn't sit right with me, but it was disorienting to not have any validation. So I was naive and arrogant as a 26-year-old, and I thought I could do anything that my parents said I couldn't do and anything that books said I couldn't do. And so we went about the process of building an organization that seemed to resonate with the experience of the members. And it wasn't until I stumbled across a book about the League of Revolutionary Black Workers and the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement that I was like, oh, there's actually a grandmother to the experience that we're trying to take on. And so there was a sort of split experience with that. Part of it was a sense of demoralization, because I was like, well, if I had known these experiences before, then we wouldn't have had to feel like we were reinventing the wheel. But then it was like we had discovered this sort of lost treasure, where all of a sudden there were people, many of them were not alive anymore, but through their writings, through the videos or films that had been made about them, we were able to try to draw lessons that might be applicable to our particular consequence or situation. I think that there is a dynamic in the United States where too often we think everything has to be new. And I think then that is coupled with the Red Scare, the push towards, push against identifying as part of a left tradition. And so for me, the reason, one of, I'd say multiple reasons why it's been important to connect my work explicitly to a left tradition is, one, because it gives me inspiration, hope, even in the darkest times, to refer back to, say, for example, the National Liberation Movement in Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, to see what they were able to do to oust a fascist Portuguese dictatorship with a bunch of largely peasants. That gives me hope that, well, maybe in the context of San Francisco organizing welfare recipients, it's not a failed project. But it also, I think, has been important for me to talk about myself explicitly as a leftist in the organizing work that I do, because it demystifies how it is that I'm engaging in the work. where too often members would say, oh my gosh, well, Steve is just really smart. So there's no way that I could ever become a strategist or become an organizer. And the reality is that what I bring to this work is the culmination of skills, experiences, perspectives that I've been able to track because I've placed our work in the context of a left trajectory. And I want the members to be able to do the exact same.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. And we do have time for one more question. I've actually got about 3 questions that ask something fairly similar. So I'm going to do my best at combining the 3. So there's one question that's asking, you know, I worry about the strategies and actions of white supremacists in organizing against what we're working for. You know, how can we organize against that? Another person asked, you know, how do we integrate self-defense, which is clearly needed in this historical moment, into a continuing struggle for justice and liberation? And I think tied to that is the third question, which is, you know, the presidential election is 67 days away. And could you describe your thinking on what transformative approaches and liberatory strategies should be employed now as we make a stand to fight against fascist incursions?
So how long do we have? I just feel like, okay, so this is great. If nothing else, I feel like you all are encouraging me to want to come to Rochester, because I will respond to this question, but I want this to be much more of a dialogue than it will probably be able to be here. Again, I will say, as somebody who is almost eligible to join the Elder Justice Committee, I have been a part of too many movement conversations that reflect a sort of pitched battle about whether or not progressives, leftists should engage in the electoral process. And I will say I have vacillated over time. But what I've also been clear about as an almost universal shortcoming of all of those discussions is that they have a myopic view of that particular presidential campaign in absence of the larger conditions and the larger strategy to liberation. In isolation, I think it is difficult, if not impossible, to be able to make a collective assessment about how it is that left and progressive forces should relate to a neoliberal candidate. But in the context of the larger arc to winning liberation for all people on the planet, I think it poses the question of, well, what is the sort of possibility? What are the openings that make themselves available because this particular candidate wins and another loses? That, I think, is something that we need to have more collective conversation about. But I do think that this election represents a unique circumstance where, as the questions have started to allude to, there is a fascist tendency that is coalescing and that the president is currently stoking. So the fact that armed vigilantes are going out to Black Lives Matter protests and literally murdering activists, I don't think is disconnected from the tweets that Trump is sending. As someone who has been disillusioned by the electoral process before, I don't think I can allow my dis-ease and uncomfortableness with the Democratic Party to drive how it is that I act over the course of the next 70 days. Because I think it is our responsibility to remove Trump from office so that he's not able to exploit that power to then further coalesce the reactionary right wing that I think he is giving voice to. We also, though, have to plan for the possibility that he may, even after losing the election, may refuse to leave the White House, which I think creates an entirely different set of context. But I think, again, that plays into this question of liberatory strategy. In liberatory strategy, we have to begin imagining the scenarios that might unfold given the particular conjuncture that we're in. So that's, I think, a quick response. It by no means gets to the nuance of all of the questions, but I will say this as a closing point. It is my assessment, even with the encroachment of fascism, that we're in a place where our public, open movement work is our best defense. And so our ability to be able to speak to healthcare for all, our ability to be able to speak to eliminating all evictions, our ability to be able to speak to saving the postal service, our ability to be able to connect all of those particular demands, not only as a sort of laundry list of things that we think would be great, but an articulation of a better world, of a world that would actually meet the interests of the vast majority of people, puts us in a position where I think we have the capability of organizing a truly massive movement, because the legitimacy of neoliberalism is starting to crumble. So we have opportunities to advance our work, and I think it means that we have to speak boldly, clearly, and audaciously. But it also sort of recognizes the slow and sort of consistent encroachment of different fascist tendencies. But I would love, love, love to continue this conversation.
I know I said last question, but there was one that came in that I must throw your way. And we're here until 8:30, so I think we can squeeze this one in. I have a question coming in about, do you see the need for creating new methods of direct action? For example, Arab Spring used new and spontaneous ways to bring large amounts of people together. Is it time to come up with new ways to demand attention to issues rather than using marches, protests, rallies, etc.? We may not know what it is yet, but do you think it is time to get creative?
Okay, so fine. I'm happy to come to Rochester. Yes, I want to have this. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And I will say again, I tried to point to this in the earlier remarks that I was making, but it's my assessment that really organizers and activists of my generation and younger, so I'm now 50, I came of age at a moment where Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher sort of announced the end of history. We'd won. And as I began my work as a community organizer, it was really in the aftermath. And literally there was the receding of organizations that had previously articulated visions that inspired me. Those organizations were starting to dissolve. And so in some very important ways, I feel like those of us who have been mostly without mentorship or really institutional support to develop our thinking as strategists have actually fallen back to an over-reliance on tactics, which to me, this question speaks directly to. So I think that too many organizations now are tactical sectarians. We do this particular thing because it represents an embodiment of what we think radical politics is supposed to look like, as opposed to saying, this is what we think liberation looks like, and I am willing to do everything that is necessary to get us there. So again, some concrete examples that have sort of pushed me on that front. One of the examples of revolutionary movements that has inspired me for years has been the national liberation of Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau. And there was a particular figure in that movement, Amilcar Cabral, that played a critical role in both founding the liberation organization, sort of forging different aspects of the movement, but then also was a brilliant tactician. And so not only helped to build an organization, but also started to imagine what they talked about as liberated zones. So as they were able to oust the Portuguese from particular regions of the country, they were then building up the infrastructure of that country, whether it's hospitals and schools. And so, you know, there are all these pictures of Cabral in this sort of like military fatigues walking around the savannah. And then I stumbled across pictures of Cabral at the UN in a suit and and I was like, oh, like that, how are you supposed to be a revolutionary in a suit? And what I had to recognize is that like that was on me. That was not about what it takes to win liberation. And what was useful was that they had won, like literally in the span of 10 years from the founding of the organization to the official ousting of the Portuguese. It was 10 years. And so for me, even in as much as I wanted to be arrogant and sort of self-righteous as a 25-year-old who only wanted to wear jeans and t-shirts, I couldn't dispute the fact that they had won. And I think part of what allowed the tactical flexibility in that particular instance was the clarity about strategy. And so I really, really appreciate that question. And I do think that we need to innovate new tactics, but it needs to be in service of a larger strategic orientation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve, not only for all the time and thought you put into the talk, but also for taking the time to answer our questions. This will absolutely be continued at another time. I'm glad that we've all as a community really convinced Steve to come visit Rochester in person. So thank you again so much, Steve.
Thank you, and congratulations.
Appreciate it. I would now like to introduce our elected president, Evelyn Evans.
Good evening. I want to personally thank Steve Williams for his inspiring delivery to us today. A special thank you to our sponsors and allies for supporting Metro Justice's first ever virtual annual dinner. Next year, we hope to see you face to face if COVID allows. I just want to say that Mohini shared with you some information about the current campaigns and videos of those campaigns that we are currently working on in Metro Justice. Each campaign needs at least two things. One of them being volunteers, you know, boots on the ground, sweat equity, and the other is financial support. Folks within Monroe County and beyond have supported Metro Justice since 1965 in its fight for racial, social, and economic justice. For each of these campaigns that we're currently working on, we need your financial support. So at this time, I'm asking that if you're not currently a member of Metro Justice, that you take this opportunity to become a sustaining member. We accept all memberships, but we would ask that you at least be a sustaining member at $5 a month, which is $60 a year. And if you're currently a Metro Justice member, thank you very much. We appreciate your support. But if you could increase your membership, that would be great as well. Once again, thank you, Steve. Thank you, sponsors. Thank you, attendees. And we look forward to meeting with you next year. At this time, we'd like to invite you to stay on the video because we have two musical selections from Hannah KP. Thank you so much.
Hi, friends of Metro Justice. My name is Hannah. It's nice to meet you, even though it's just through our screens at this time. When Miley asked me if I would be interested in playing a couple songs for you all today, I wasn't aware of Metro Justice, to be honest with you. But after I looked up your website and saw all your initiatives, I didn't hesitate for a second and was very honored to be asked. among so many songs that seem to be fitting and appropriate after learning about you, it was very hard to pick two songs to play for you today. But I like to start with a song called I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free. It was written by great piano player, jazz pianist, and composer Dr. Billy Taylor. And I believe he wrote the first verse to this song, and later Dick Dallas put the rest of the lyrics. I think the song speaks for itself, so instead of explaining any further, I'll just play this one for you. I hope you like it. Next, I like to play you one of my songs. This is something I wrote back in maybe late March or early April after we all kind of got caught off guard in a way by this COVID-19. I think the song itself says a lot about kind of things I've been thinking. So I hope you like this song. The song is called Mirror, 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 Mirror. I always have a trouble pronouncing it, but Mirror, Mirror. I hope you like it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4. nobody but myself to blame. Mirror, mirror, tell me what I'd like to know. Now you turn the soul around, tell me what the future holds. Maybe it's true, I was too naive to think that ain't my problem. Said have yourself a good day, and we go on and on and on and running in circles once again. But I'm here, mirror, mirror, tell me what the future holds. That Sunday morning, I admit I overslept. I'm sorry I missed church, but I got up way too late. But there is one thing that I know, and I believe it to be true, yeah. We all brothers and sisters, and I refuse to hate. Our boat's been overturned. Mirror, mirror, please, we want you to reveal, yeah, how to care for one another and the lessons to be learned. So now we stop, listen to you, ready to face the truth. Life ain't always fair, but that's why we've been taught to share. Plant the seeds of kindness, there's much more to gain. Take time to thank our heroes, though you're not alone. Mirror, mirror's been telling me the answer all along. I see myself, you see yourself. Now that's what the future holds. Together, let us break this chain. In a world with compassion, we all trying, that ain't no shame. Soon this trouble will be over, but we may have to make some change, yeah, people. Cause the mirror, mirror, it only ever shows what it sees. What you and I can do today, now that's what the future holds. The world is the mirror, and it reflects each one of us. So what about us? What about us? What about us? Hey. What about us? Thanks for inviting me to share this music with you today. And most importantly, thank you for caring. I hope to connect with you in person sometime in the future. But in the meantime, everybody be safe and take care. Thank you. Bye.
Huge thank you to Hannah PK for that amazing and uplifting performance. Thank you all for an absolutely wonderful evening, and we'll see you all in the struggle. Take care.